Some movies don't just disappear from memory. They vanish like they never existed at all. These 90s thrillers played in theaters, had real marketing budgets, starred recognizable actors, and then nothing. So while everyone was quoting Hannibal Lecter, these films were gathering dust in the back rows of Blockbuster, waiting to shine. Pacific Heights should have been huge. Michael Keaton playing a psychotic tenant, terrorizing landlords Melanie Griffith and Matthew Modine in San Francisco's most expensive neighborhood. Released in September 1990, right after Keaton's Batman success. But audiences weren't ready for him as a calculating sociopath who knew tenant law better than most lawyers. John Schlesinger directed it like a documentary about rental hell.
Look, I know you're in there. I can hear you in there. I've got a key, so if you don't open the door, I'm just...
Keaton's character, Carter Hayes, never raises his voice, but systematically destroys his landlords' lives using cockroaches, construction noise, and legal loopholes. The film was shot in an actual Victorian house at 1243 19th Street in San Francisco that cost $2 million, even in 1990. Keaton improvised the scene where he breeds cockroaches in jars. The props department had prepared fake ones, but he insisted on using real insects. Turns out the real villain Gotham needed protection from wasn't wearing clown makeup. He was filing noise complaints and breeding roaches in Victorian San Francisco. Deceived hit theaters in September 1991, with Goldie Hawn trying to prove she could do serious thrillers. She plays a one who discovers her entire marriage is built on lies after her husband dies in a suspicious car accident. The movie's problem wasn't Hawn. It was that nobody believed Goldie Hawn could be naive enough to be deceived. Director Damian Harris shot the film's museum scenes at the Guggenheim, closing entire sections for weeks. John Hurd, playing the husband with a double life, created two completely different physical mannerisms for each identity. Different walking patterns, different ways of holding silverware. He never told Hawn which version he'd use in each take. The Egyptian necklace that becomes crucial to the plot was a real antiquity on loan, insured for $2 million. The insurance company required an armed guard on set every day it appeared on camera. The movie vanished from memory almost immediately, but Hawn's performance proved she could handle darker material. Audiences just preferred her smiling. Bad Influence paired Rob Lowe with James Spader in March 1990, just months after Lowe's real-life videotape scandal at the Democratic National Convention. The casting was intentional. Curtis Hanson wanted someone who could believably corrupt Spader's buttoned-up analyst character, and Lowe's public image made him perfect for a role about hidden cameras and blackmail. The pier scene, where Lowe's character beats a mugger with increasing violence, was shot in one continuous take at Lowe's insistence. He wanted the transformation from defender to predator to feel seamless. Spader learned to pick locks for the movie because he said his character would be methodical about learning from his corruptor. The videotape scenes in the film used the exact same type of camera involved in Lowe's scandal, a Sony Video 8. Hansen claimed this was coincidence, but the props department later admitted it was deliberately chosen. Lowe played himself playing a sociopath, and somehow that double layer made the whole thing more disturbing than fiction alone could have managed. Mortal Thoughts barely existed in theaters, but featured Demi Moore and Bruce Willis at the height of their fame, with Willis playing against type as an abusive drunk. The entire movie is told in flashback during Moore's police interrogation, with the camera holding on her face for uncomfortable lengths while she recounts whether she killed her best friend's husband. Director Alan Rudolph filmed the interrogation scenes over 8 straight days, keeping Moore isolated from the other actors to maintain her character's psychological state. Willis, who was married to Moore during filming, was reportedly so convincing as the abusive husband that crew members avoided him between takes. Harvey Keitel, playing the detective, improvised most of his interrogation tactics based on real techniques he'd learned researching previous roles. Watching a real married couple play out such brutal domestic violence on screen created an uncomfortable tension nobody talked about. Willis and Moore divorced 2 years later. While Dead Calm technically premiered in April 1989, it didn't reach most American theaters until early 1990, making it a 90s thriller by default. Nicole Kidman and Sam Neill are trapped on a yacht with Billy Zane, who might have killed everyone on his previous boat. The entire film essentially has 3 actors and 1 location: the ocean. Director Philip Noyce filmed on open water for 2 months, making the cast genuinely seasick. Kidman did her own stunts, including the scene where she's knocked overboard in a storm. That wasn't supposed to happen. A real wave hit unexpectedly, and Noyce kept filming. Billy Zane spent 3 weeks alone on the abandoned yacht to method act his character's isolation. He later said he started having conversations with himself that worried the crew monitoring him on the radio. It's the rare thriller where the ocean itself becomes the 4th character, unpredictable, isolating, and ultimately more dangerous than any human villain could be. One False Move came out in limited release in 1992, and might be the best thriller nobody saw. Bill Paxton plays a small-town sheriff about to face 3 killers fleeing Los Angeles, not knowing one of them has a history with his town. Carl Franklin directed it with such confidence that Roger Ebert championed it personally, calling theater owners to demand wider distribution. The film's opening murder sequence was shot in one house over 18 hours straight, with the actors staying awake to maintain the exhausted, coked-out energy of the killers. Cinda Williams, playing Fantasia, was cast just 3 days before filming began, when the original actress walked off. Billy Bob Thornton, who co-wrote and starred as one of the killers, based the character on people he'd known growing up in Arkansas. He and co-writer Tom Epperson wrote the script in 2 weeks while living in the same apartment, passing pages back and forth. Nobody saw it coming, but this 2-week script written in a shared apartment would end up being the calling card that turned Paxton into a leading man and Thornton into Hollywood's go-to for Southern menace. Romeo is Bleeding gave Gary Oldman his most unhinged role as a corrupt cop caught between the mob and an assassin played by Lena Olin, who turns sensuality into a weapon that draws blood. Released in February 1994, it flopped so hard most people have never heard of it, but Oldman considers it one of his favorite performances. Olin trained for 4 months to do the scene where she murders someone using only her thighs while handcuffed to a bed. She dislocated her shoulder during rehearsal, but continued filming. The scene where she appears to cut off her own arm was achieved using a magic trick consultant who taught her sleight of hand. Oldman's character narrates from the future, recording his story on cassette tapes in a diner. They filmed those scenes last, after Oldman had lost 20 pounds to show the physical toll of his character's downfall. Director Peter Medic shot the film like a 1940s noir, but with 90s violence. And the result is a movie that feels like it was beamed in from an alternate universe, where film noir never stopped evolving. It just got progressively more unhinged. Unlawful Entry turned home security into home invasion when Kurt Russell and Madeline Stowe make the mistake of befriending Ray Liotta's officer Pete Davis after a break-in. Released in June 1992, Liotta makes his cop feel like he genuinely believes he's the hero of this story. He rode along with LAPD officers for a month, and several of them admitted they knew cops who'd crossed similar lines. The scene where he plants drugs in Russell's car was based on a real LAPD scandal that broke during filming. Director Jonathan Kaplan insisted on filming in a middle-class Los Angeles home, rather than a mansion, to make the invasion feel achievable to average viewers. The film's most uncomfortable scene, where Liotta stands in the couple's bedroom at night just watching them sleep, was Liotta's suggestion. He'd heard about a real case where an officer did exactly that for months before being caught. The film tapped into something primal about home invasion, the idea that the person you called for help could become the very threat you were trying to keep out. Eye for an Eye gave Sally Field her darkest role as a mother who hears her daughter's murder over a phone call and decides the justice system isn't enough when the killer walks free. Released in January 1996, audiences weren't prepared for America's sweetheart planning cold-blooded revenge. The opening phone call scene was Field's first day of filming. Director John Schlesinger gave her an earpiece where she could hear the actual dialogue being performed live in another room, so her reactions were genuine. Kiefer Sutherland played the killer with such casual evil that Field couldn't look at him between takes. The The film's vigilante support group scenes were based on real organizations that existed in Los Angeles. Several members visited the set and made the cast uncomfortable with their matter-of-fact discussions of revenge fantasies. Sally Field spent her entire career making us believe in the power of kindness, but this film asked what happens when kindness runs out, and nobody was ready for that answer. Breakdown saw Kurt Russell return to thriller territory in 1997 as a man whose wife vanishes after their car breaks down in the desert. What starts as a simple missing person case becomes a conspiracy involving an entire town. Jonathan Mostow directed it as Hitchcock meets the American Southwest. The film's truck stunts were all practical, including the scene where Russell hangs from the bottom of a moving semi. No green screen, no safety cables visible on camera. Russell insisted on doing it himself. J.T. Walsh, playing the villainous trucker, never blinked during his close-ups, a detail he added after studying sociopathic behavior. He died just months after the film's release, making this one of his last roles. The scene where Russell discovers the conspiracy involves an entire town was shot with real locals from the California desert town of Victorville. Mostow told them to act naturally suspicious, and their genuine unfriendliness made the paranoia feel authentic. It's the perfect nightmare scenario for the AAA era. Your car dies in the middle of nowhere, and the only people around to help are the ones who've been waiting for someone exactly like you to break down.